Hello everybody and welcome back to A Spot at the Table. I would like to apologize for the fact that when I last did this video, even though it was the third recording I had done, I posted it in haste, didn't really check over the video and see how well it had come out, and it turns out that somehow I had messed with all of my camera settings and ruined the video entirely. It was 40 something minutes long. I'm going to try to cut that down a little bit too, just to save on recording time. My phone only has a specific amount of memory, and I'm running out. I did move a lot of it over to different web sharing sites. I do eventually plan on buying an external hard drive to make it so I don't have to worry about that. But I digress. So, today we're going to be talking about Blades in the Dark. This, for everybody watching, this is the fourth time I've recorded this video, so I'm pretty good at knowing what I'm talking about right now, which is irritating, but also hilarious. So, we're going to start off with a few pros and cons. Pros to this game is all you are going to need is the D6s. This means anytime you want to play this game, you just bust open a couple Monopoly games and you have enough dice to play. Or you can bust open Risk and steal the dice from there, because then you can use those and they work just as well. Blades in the Dark is a dark historical, I would say Victorian age industrial fantasy setting based in a place called Duskfall. The world is dark because the sun has been broken. The place called the Gate of Death has shattered, and the dead wander the earth along with these things called Leviathans. Leviathans are effectively super powerful demons. Demons do exist, minor demons, and you have a chance of running into them. But the thing that really sets Blades in the Dark apart for me is the fact that the gameplay mechanics are so well written and so well nuanced for the game itself that it's really hard to nitpick. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Also, shout out to James Harper and the entire team over at Evil Hat Productions. If they ever see this video, I would like to say, congratulations. You made it really hard to find any cons for this game. And the only con I have is, again, everybody who's watching, this is just my opinion. The only con I have is this game is really not meant to be run by people who have never run a game before. And it is definitely not meant to be run for people who have never played a game before. Blades in the Dark is as I said, dark role-playing fantasy world set in the Victorian industrial era after the apocalypse. So, we're going to get right into a couple of things. As I said, Evil Hat Productions, fantastic. Perfect. Good job. We have the basics here. We have the thanks and the acknowledgements, which are fantastic. Shows that they actually care about their community. And we're going to talk about how this game is more played, and then I'm going to describe what the games really are supposed to be about. Actually, I'll start with what it's supposed to be about, because otherwise it gets a little confusing down the line. You are playing a scoundrel trying to survive in this dark world with everything around you being bigger, better, or way more advanced than you are. You are a newly created crew of either assassins, bravos. Actually, I can show you the list. You are either a new crew of assassins, bravos, cult, hawkers, shadows, or smugglers. Now, these are just generic terms for criminals, but in relation, it'll be something I explain later. But you are literally the criminal underworld. So, that means that if you've been dreaming about playing a thief and you haven't been able to play a thief and your game master pulls this out, congratulations, you're going to be playing some form of criminal. You'll be able to play a thief, you could play an assassin, you could play a cultist. And I do like the fact that all their classes are very unique, as they actually make sense for them. So, without further ado, let's get into the game itself. I already talked about the setting a little bit. Blades in the Dark is, again, very dark. I like it. You should play it. It is fantastic. I am not sponsored by this company, nor would I ever accept a sponsorship because I just love the game that much. But this is a fantastically written role-playing game. So, yeah. This is all just generic things. This is the touchstones, or where they pulled a lot of their ideas. Now we're just going to go right into the core system here, and we're going to talk about conversation. This is a tabletop role-playing game. In other words, it's a conversation between players and game master. You as a player are just as important to the storyline as the game master telling you the story. Because without your proper planning or your actions, the story really stagnates and it has no excitement. So remember that when you're playing any tabletop role-playing game, you have just as much power as the game master. You are just as important to the story. Sorry, again, I'm in a cold-ass attic. But it's really nice. Oh, just to point out, I did increase the lighting a bit because of the fact that it was so dark last time. You couldn't really see anything. Hoping this time you can actually read the words that are on the page. If not, oh well. I'll explain it all, and at least this time you can actually read anything like this right here, the core system. You can actually read that. It's a little awkward, but you can read it. Everything in this game is based around actions that the player decides. So, players decide what is a reasonable way of solving the problem put before them by the game master. They then decide which action they are going to roll. Game master decides how effective the action is going to be, how dangerous the action is. He also decides any consequences that are inflicted due to the action or to manifest any of the dangers from the circumstances. Situation asks, does it call for a die roll? This is a game master decision if it calls for a die roll or not. And it also talks about right here that the players get to decide whether the event in the story match the experiences triggering the character for crew advancement. In other words, you have a say in how much experience your entire party gets. Remember that. Very important. The dice rolling system is actually very easy. If you roll, because you roll a dice pool, if you roll 2 6s, you have critically succeeded. If you roll a single 6, because it's usually based off the highest die you roll, if you roll a 6, you have succeeded without consequence. If you roll 4 or 5 as your highest roll, you have succeeded, but you have a consequence. And if you roll a 1 through 3, you have failed, and it is a bad outcome. So, we're going to talk about the different types of rolls. It's right here, for those who are following along on the page. We have action rolls, downtime rolls, fortune rolls, resistance rolls. And action rolls are interesting because action rolls and resistance rolls down here are double duty rolls. Because the game master does not roll dice in this game. It is all about player action. This game is about how you react to the dangers, how you interact with the world. It is not about how the game master determines their characters to be. So, without further ado, we're going to move on. Game structure. This is how you play the game. It goes from free play to engagement roll to score to downtime back to free play. So, free play is your character's scenes, actions, consequences, gathering information, choosing a target, creating a plan. The same thing you would do if you were playing any other role-playing game. After you have decided all of this, you make an engagement roll. I will get to engagement rolls to explain that later, but effectively it is a roll that determines how well set up on the score you are. Your score, on the other hand, is the actions and consequences along with the flashbacks that you were going to use to help you with these actions and consequences for the gameplay. This is where the meat of the action happens. This is where you as a player shine. Mind you, you in this game are not the biggest, baddest thing. Very important to know that. Instead, you are just another peon on the streets. So we're going to talk about the actions and attributes and how action rolls are made. Where was I at? There are 12 actions in the game. They're all right here. And then there are 3 attributes, which are right here. And it's really hard to understand, really, if you're looking at the character sheet for the first time and you've never played one of these games, to understand how these things work. So, there are exactly 4 skills for each of the 3 attributes, which equals out to 12. I've already stated that there were 12 actions, so if you didn't guess that, learn to do math. So when you're looking at attributes, see how it says insight and then it has a dot underneath it. Do you see this little gray line right here? That little gray line tells you exactly how you determine your insight rank, or your insight dice pool. Every dot on this side of the line is I should say on the left side of the line, for those who are not paying attention and just listening, is another die to your insight resistance rule. Same with your prowess, same with your resolve. Anything on the left side of the little gray line, that's just your attribute dice. Everything from the attribute line over, so see how it has 2 dots? For the attune action, that'd be 2 dice you roll. And as you continue play, you will eventually get more dots because you can advance your character and make it a little bit more built how you want it to be. I'm going to point out, you have a 65% chance of success in this game just with 1 die. I'm going to apologize if you can hear the dogs barking in the background. Their owner is not home. He just let me come up to the attic. Shout out to Logan if you're watching this or listening to this. Thank you for being so really helpful with this. And thank you to my friend Mike, who is allowing me to stay at his house right now. And Keegan, my roommate, who is helping me mentally right now. I am not okay. I am just very good at pretending. So, also, look at this artwork, guys. It is phenomenal. If you haven't seen comic book artwork, if you're not a big fan of comic book artwork, I can see you not liking it. But I grew up on comics. My Uncle John used to work at a comic book store, and I love comics. This is the kind of artwork I want to see in games because it draws me and it makes me want to play. After attributes in action, it does talk about stress and trauma. And the reason is because actions have consequences. You have powers in this game. Each class has special abilities. Special abilities usually are triggered by you spending stress. A resistance roll is triggered by spending 6 stress minus the highest die you roll on the resistance roll. You can push yourself for 2 stress to gain an extra die to the roll or add 1 level of effect. You can also take an action when you are incapacitated by pushing yourself. But if you hit 6 stress, you gain a trauma. When you gain a trauma, you are taken out of the action. If you are in the middle of a score, you are removed from the score, and you come back at the end of downtime right before free play, having indulged in your vices to lower your stress down to 0, so you have the ability to start gaining stress again. There are several types of trauma, as you can see. The cold, the haunted, obsessed, paranoid, reckless, soft, unstable, vicious. These are things that you don't really want to gain, but if you gain them, they add a lot of roleplay to your characters, so it's a mechanic that helps with roleplay aspect, and I really like that. Supernatural creatures almost always cause you to gain stress because they're terrifying. They're supposed to be terrifying. I'm looking at the clock. I'm probably not going to get past... I'm probably going to have to another 45-minute video, but I don't really care. Progress clocks are really interesting because, as you can see, a 4-segment, 6-segment, 8-segment clock. There are different types of progress clocks. There are simple obstacles. There are danger clocks, there are racing clocks, linked clocks, mission clocks, tug-of-war clocks, and long-term projects, along with faction clocks, but I don't really like using those, unless your entire faction is working toward a single goal. But we'll come back to the simple action clocks, simple obstacle clocks. These are things like having a little bit of trouble lifting something, or if you guys are strenuously working on a specific thing, you might have this progress clock come into play. They're simple things you can do, not overly complex. And if it's too simple, you just want to resolve it with an action roll. You don't want to create a clock. Danger clocks are GM's tools, really useful. It allows you to put down and put a little bit of tension on your players, just like I'm starting this clock. You don't even have to tell them in this game that you're starting a clock, but I like to because it puts a lot of tension on the players. But what you can do is say, I'm going to start this clock and have this danger come in after a certain amount of time or after a certain number of actions have been taken. And every time someone takes an action, or every time someone does something that increases the time clock, you mark down one of the segments. And after so many segments, the danger hits. Racing clocks are kind of interesting because you create two opposing clocks to represent the race. Racing clocks are really interesting because you can use them more for searches, you can use them for hazards. Racing clocks are useful for a lot of things, but linked clocks are one of my favorites because it goes with the long-term project clock, in my opinion. If your long-term project has been taking you a while, but it still seems like, hey, it's been too short for you to actually gain access to the project, or say the game master realizes that he gave you a 4-segment clock when he should have given you an 8-segment clock, he can go, all right, you've succeeded in completing the first of the linked clocks, and then tell you what you've completed and then tell you what you still need to do, and then add in a linked clock. Linked clocks are very useful. I use them in a lot of the games I'm currently writing. I'll talk about those eventually, probably with the camera facing me so you all can see my hideous face. But other than that, you'll love it. Mission clocks are time-sensitive missions. Very rarely do I ever use these, but I can see the appeal of them. The problem with my thought process on these is I've had too many time-sensitive missions in video games that have driven me away from time sensitivity in missions. But I, again, can see the appeal of them because they do create a lot of stressors for the game. Like, if you tell somebody, hey, just letting you know, this mission is time sensitive because you only have so many hours before the sword master who is protecting this guy shows up as an assassin, you don't want to be there when the sword master shows up because he's going to roll you over. Tug of war clocks are an interesting concept. I rarely use them because they can be filled and emptied by events. And it's like a back and forth rolls as you play. I don't really like tug of war clocks because if one side is working actively to activate a tug of war clock to gain a background to it, it really causes the other side to have a lot harder of a time fighting against it. Mind you, I can see the appeal of them. I can see, hey, it works. But it's just not my kind of style of play. Core mechanic, though. Use them if you want to. Long-term project clocks, I've already talked about it. Very important to the game. It's about creating things, because some of the things you can do in your downtime is work on a long-term project. Very cool things you can do. Especially if you are a leech, because you can build things with the tinker skill. And that can be really cool. Like, you can modify weapons if you really want to, if your game master allows it. Faction clocks are a little bit different. Faction clocks are about PCs putting downtime into gaining goals as an entire faction, not just one person. I haven't seen this in play. I've tried to use them, but most of my games in this... I haven't run this as much as I would like, but most of my players don't normally work together on single faction rules, even though they are technically a team. They usually play selfish characters. Not that that's a bad thing, because you are playing scoundrels and thieves and assassins and drug dealers and whatever else you run across. Again, the general breakdown of how you want to do action rolls. Player states their goal. Player chooses the action rating. Kind of cool. I like that. It gives the player control over what they roll. My big problem is, if you're using a skill that makes absolutely no sense to the action, I'm going to tell you it has little to no effect. Most likely going to tell you it has no effect unless you roll a critical. Because I'm sorry, you are not going to skirmish someone into dating you unless that is exactly what their kink is. But I'm not here to kink shame. So if you're into fighting somebody before you sleep with them, have fun with that. The Game Master sets the position. Now, positions are actually separated into 3 categories: controlled, risky, and desperate. And positions tell you how dangerous the action is. So, if you are in a controlled position, you are the person who is, again, in control of that situation. You do not have to worry. You actually know what you're doing. You are more likely to be able to succeed at the roll without any issues. If you do fail, worst case scenario, it knocks you down to the risky position because you made a minor mistake. It doesn't put you in a bad scenario. Risky is where most things are. Head-to-head combat, acting under duress, taking a chance, things like that are considered risky. So, I would say risky, really fun. It makes it a little bit more dangerous to play, but it does allow for more role-play activity. It does allow for more fun. Then we have desperate. You are out of control. You are completely under somebody else's thumb. You are in danger. You are in serious trouble. So be very careful. When you are in a desperate situation or a desperate position, you want to be very careful because you're really close to getting yourself into a lot of danger. Then we have effect levels. We have limited, standard, or great effect. So, how do you determine this? Like I told you before, if you as a player decide that you're going to roll something along the lines of skirmish to flirt with somebody, you're going to have limited to no effect. If you're using sway or consort, which are skills meant to, make somebody swoon over you, I'd say standard. And if you're really good at it, I'd say it has great effect. But if you fail, like say you roll a 1 through 3, you're not succeeding at all. You just failed, along with creating a bad consequence for yourself. If you roll a 4 or a 5, you might have succeeded, but it might have lowered the effect level by a bit. You might have gone from a standard to a limited effect, which happens. And then we have the adding of bonus dice. Bonus dice is actually kind of cool. You can gain up to 2 bonus dice per action. You can either gain assistance from a party member, which causes them to take a stress and then give you a die. You could push yourself, which we talked about earlier in the stress and trauma section, which allows you to gain a die by gaining 2 stress yourself. Or you can accept the devil's bargain. Devil's bargains are kind of cool, because as the game master, I'm not the only one who proposes those. Things like collateral damage, unintended harm, sacrifice coin or an item, betray a friend or a loved one, offend or anger a faction, start and or tick a troublesome clock, add heat to the crew from evidence or witnesses, or suffer a level of harm. We'll talk about harm later. It's very important because if you suffer a certain number of harms, you die. So, resistance rolls, my friend. Resistance rolls. So, this is just step 6. You roll the dice and judge the results. Players roll the dice. Game master judges the result. Tells you what happens. And again, here's another one of those action roll summaries that we've been talking about. Here's how you gain extra dice, assistance, either push or devil's bargain. Like I was talking about double duty rolls. A lot of actions and resistances are double duty, because if you're resisting someone striking you in the throat, that is both a double duty of their attack and your defense. If you roll a 1 through 3, they've attacked you successfully. If you roll a 4 or 5, you defended successfully, but you still might take a level of harm. You might have just reduced their effect level. And if you roll a 6, you successfully defend, in my opinion, but some people will still lower the harm down to like just one of the weak ones, like bruised or scratched. And if you critically succeed and they still give you harm, screw them. They're not running the game correctly. Especially if you're in the controlled situation, screw them. We've already talked about effect levels and how they work, because there's potency, quality, tiers, scale. These are all things that affect the effect. Dominant factors include, there are dominant factors in everything, so it's usually these 3 things. Trading position for effect. You can lower your position to gain an effect. Like up the effect, which is kind of cool. So, if your effect wasn't going to be very successful, say you had a controlled position, but you were willing to lower it down to risky in order to make it so you have a better effect level, you can do that. And that's a player choice. That's not a game master choice. That is a player choice. Effects in the fiction. This just explains how effects work. Why we do this, consequences. These are all things that you should read, but I'm not going to stop and let you read them right now. Not because I don't want you to. Again, look at that lovely artwork. It's just so pretty. But we're going to talk about setting position and effect. I don't need to go over because this is all stuff that you have to worry about as a game master. Buy the book, by the way. It's only like $35, maybe $40. I bought mine for $20 on sale. It's definitely worth it. Mine's in pretty good condition. I've had this for like 6 years, and I've used it and abused it, and it is in great condition. So again, hats off to Evil Hat Productions because they make quality products. Consequences and harm. So, you ready to hear some of the consequences you can run into? If you roll that 4 or 5 and you still have a minor consequence, you can reduce the effect. You can run into a complication, you can lose an opportunity, you can lose your position, or you can suffer harm. We were talking about how harms are dangerous. This is why. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 effective hit points. If you suffer 1 level 1 harm, you're not really taking much things other than that's it. 2 level 1 harms, on the other hand, you're automatically reducing the effect of whatever you're doing. Take 3 level 1 harms, you gain a level 2. 2 level 2 harms, you're losing 1 die on whatever you're rolling. Level 3 harm, you are in need of help. You only gain 1 level 3 slot, and if you take level 4 harm, you are dying. Or dead. It depends on how cruel your game master is. But we'll talk about that later. So, things you can do. Reduce effect is just that. The effect level is reduced. You go from a great effect to a standard, from standard to a limited, from limited to no effect. You could gain a complication. Some serious complications are more severe, like reinforcements surrounding you and trapping you. Some of the complications are you just generate heat because you left evidence behind, some form of evidence that your crew was there. But right here, very important. Any game master who's running this game who does this, and I've done this as my first time running this game, so I apologize. Again, Logan, I'm sorry. Don't inflict a complication that negates a successful roll. If PCs try to corner an enemy and get a 4 or 5, don't say that the enemy escapes, because 4 or 5 is a success. It's a partial success, but it's a success. Don't say the player's roll succeeded, so the enemy is cornered. Maybe the PC has to wrestle them into position, and during the scuffle, the enemy grabs their gun, but you succeeded. Lost opportunities. This is just a simple, you had a chance to do something, now you don't. Worst position, again, you go from controlled to risky, from risky to desperate. You don't want to go below desperate, because then you take a level of harm. Resistance and armor. Resistance in this game is very complicated. By that I mean, you roll dice. Again, this is one of those double duty rolls. It is about your roll. It is not about the Game Master's decision. Game Master narrates what happens. You decide whether you're going to resist or not. If you are a Game Master and you are playing this game and you've never run this game before, I would recommend taking into consideration things like their skill level. If you are running new base scoundrels who have never done it, and say a cutter gets into a fight with somebody who's the same skill level, if he has a good resistance against the attacks that they're throwing at him, make it so he's taking level 1 harms. That way when he succeeds even with a 4 or 5, yes, he gains a complication of some sort, or a consequence of some sort, but you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't take that level 1 harm. On the other hand, if he's fighting a sword master and he's a level, like a low tier character, he's a low tier character. Let his ass get beat. I apologize for all the swearing. I've had a foul mood lately, and I'm trying to keep this family friendly, but I'm not doing a very good job today. Armor is expended. You do not subtract armor from damage. You can use armor to negate levels of damage. So, in other words, this is a good example right here. If you take a level 2 harm, cut to the ribs, and you have armor, and you failed on your resistance roll, he can burn the armor to reduce the harm. So, cut to the ribs would become bruised, so it goes from a level 2 harm to a level 1 harm. If he's wearing heavy armor, he could mark a second box, because light armor has 1, heavy armor has 2 boxes, and some classes, most classes, give you a special kind of armor that negates a special kind of, gives you a special armor against a specific thing. Remember those things. If you have armor, like your special armor, use them. Use them. Because if you forget, and you die, The only one you have to blame is yourself. Fortune rolls are kind of cool. Gain 1 for each trait rating. So, determine the situations the PCs aren't directly involved in and don't want to simply decide the outcome. When an outcome is uncertain, these are times you roll fortune rolls. When you make a fortune roll, you may assess any trait rating to determine the dice pool of the roll. So, I could look at your faction sheet and be like, roll your coins. I wouldn't do that because you can have a lot of coins, but I'm saying I could. Some of the traits are like tier, could be your turf, could be a lot of things, honestly. But that's what you do. You make a fortune roll based off of a trait, and then you gain a bonus roll for major advantages, you gain a -1 for major disadvantages, and then you roll. And just like any other roll, it's a pass and fail system. Very simple. 1 through 3 is a failure, 4 and 5 is partial success, 6 is a full success, and 2 6s is a critical. I'm not going to talk about gathering information because it's kind of cool, but I want you all who own this book to read the investigation. It is awesome. This is just the examples of play section, PC versus PC. Coins and stash. So, you will have chances as you go through this game to gain a lot of money. You are scoundrels, you are doing jobs, you are trying to make money. That is like the goal. Well, that's really weird. Sorry, I just noticed something on my camera. I don't know what it is. Really weird. Might have broken my camera and I don't realize why. I'll look at that later. We'll fix that. It's in the top corner right here and I don't know what that is. Huh. I was wrong. There's no crack in lines. I have no idea what it is. Oh, it's the reflection on the pages. Okay. Apparently the light's too bright. See? Flex onto the pages and then... Sorry, I'm messing around with the light and probably screwing with your eyes. Apologies. Anyways, especially, by the way, that cut hole. I had to pause the video because I was really worried about my phone there for a second. But coins, as you're playing, you will gain coins. You can use it for monetary value to buy things, bribe people, whatnot. You can only have up to really 10 coins on you. The rest is usually put in your stash for retirement. And when you have 40 in your stash, you might as well retire because you are living the high life, my friend. I usually make people spend coins to indulge in their vices because it says to do that in the Game Master section. I'm not going to go into the Game Master section, by the way, because if you want to read it, buy the book. But stash is how much you have in like investments and hidden away in for your retirement. Coin is how much you have on you. And as you can see, liquidating a significant asset, carriage and goats, a horse, a deed to a small property. Coin is not an arbitrary thing. It can be very important. Now, this is the part that I'm not sure how I feel about the faction game. You are all part of a faction. If your players don't want to play a faction game, don't run this game. Because you are part of a faction. You are building a faction, in fact, from the ground up. You have a tier equivaling out to, because you start at tier 0. You might, or maybe tier 1. It depends on what your players want to do. But either way, you're starting out with 3 to 6 people. If you have, and you are always in the turf of another gang when you start out. So, you're more likely a subordinate gang to somebody else. On the faction ladder next to the tier number is the letter indicating the strength of each faction's hold. Your hold is your hideout, and your strength is determined how hard it is to attack you. Weak holds tend to get destroyed. Strong holds tend to hold out. But you see, I guess you do, yeah, like I said, you begin at tier 0. That's what I thought. But your crew begins with a stronghold at tier 0. Which means you have a good position in the area that you're in where you're not going to get attacked because you have a strong hold there. Development, moving up the ladder to develop your crew, you gain rep. Reputation is important because the more rep you have, the higher your tier can gain. Turf, you gain turf by buying it or earning it. You can reducing your hold. You may perform an operation successfully to reduce the hold of another faction if you know how they are vulnerable. When factions is at war, see page 46, which I'll flip to, is a temporarily loses one hold. Your crew can lose hold too. Hold following the same rules above. If your crew is tier 0 with a weak hold and you lose hold for any reason, your layer becomes under threat by your enemies or by a faction seeking to profit from your misfortune. Status is important. Sorry about that, my nose started itching. Make sure that you are playing the faction, if you're playing the faction game, that you're keeping a good status. Try to keep a good status with the people around you. Try to have a bad status with those who are outside of your range. Especially if you have a couple of big gangs around you. Keep them as allies, that way you're protected. Because if you're at war with them, and they're all surrounding you, and you're a small crew, you're most likely going to get boned. Claims are kind of cool. Each one of the factions has its own little turf map. Its own little claims map, and it usually involves turf, some abilities, some powers that are unique to it. It's actually really cool. You can lose claims though, which it means an enemy faction came over and it's like, hey, this is ours now, and you have to fight back against it. Or you could lose reputation and just let them have it. Advancement. This is how you advance as a PC. This is how you advance as a crew. Then you have the ability to change your playbook. Change your playbook because it's important. We have character types. These are your character types. The scoundrels. You have the cutter, the hound, the leech, the lurk, the slide, the spider, and the whisper, which is fighter, sniper, tinkerer, thief, charlatan, mastermind, occultist. You choose your background. Your background gives you trait. You have your 4 action dots that you assign. One that goes to your... One action that reflects your heritage. One action that affects your background. And then you get to choose your special ability. Each class has special abilities. Like I was talking about earlier, but these classes' special abilities are absolutely insane. Like this right here. Your load limits are higher. Light is 5, normal is 7, 8 is heavy. That's a lot. That means you can just loot the crap out of somebody's house. Not to be trifled with, savage, vigorous, which takes 1d to healing treatment rolls, which having a bonus to healing rolls is great. Your hounds. I'm not going to show you all their abilities. I'm just going to skip past the classes, but they're actually they're really cool. If you get the chance to buy this book, please buy this book. I'd love to discuss with you people about how this game runs. Then we have the crew, which also, again, talked about how each one has its own turf map, but what I didn't tell you is each one has an upgrade. And these are important, because you also have special abilities from your crew. Like Deadly Crowsville. This is all assassin, obviously. No traces, patron, predators, vipers. It's important that you keep track of your crew's special abilities, because your crew special abilities give you opportunities. Makes people more wary of you. It can also make you a threat to bigger people, which would make them want to stomp you out. But if you're good enough, they're not going to want to. Just going to skip past this again. Get right to it. Don't want to get past that. Okay. Planning and engagement. So, the best part about this game is, most of the time, your characters plan. You do the action for them. This is just a cool picture. His signature for the artwork is up here, by the way. It's great. But It's just a cool picture. Sorry, I love the artwork in this game. I keep doing that. I'm geeking out about it. I'm a nerd. But planning an engagement is very important because you get to choose how your plan goes into effect. Like, are you going to assault? Are you going to deceive your way in? Going to stealth your way in? Going to summon some ghosts to beat the crap out of some people? Going to socialize into a social gathering and try to break your way through? Maybe you're going to transport something in and sneak in like, Trojan horse. But as you are doing this, you get your item loadout, which is determined by your class. Then you do the engagement rule. We talked about this. You gain 1 for sheer luck, you gain 1 for a major advantage, and you lose 1 for a major disadvantage. Jesus, sneezing out my ass. Again, I'm sorry about the swearing today. It's atrocious. But we'll talk about the engagement rules. Some of the things that can happen. If you get a critical success on the engagement rule, you have an exceptional result, you've already overcome the first obstacle, and you're in a controlled position for what's next. Good results, you are in a controlled position for the action that starts. Mixed results, you are in a risky position when the action starts. Bad results, you are in a desperate position when the action starts. How long does it last? That depends. We'll talk about that, and I'll let you read about that later, but you can do linked plans. I want to get to one of my favorite aspects of this game, the flashbacks, which is the next page. Good. So, some of the things you can do in flashbacks. You can take your time while you're in the action and be like, hey, can I do a flashback? You take a couple of stress and you're able to change something that you did in the past. Flashback to a time when you were doing something. You narrate what you did. I have you determine it either by a roll, or if I decide that you don't need to roll, you just do it. It happens. But there are limits. Like, if you're being interrogated by an inspector, you can't be like, I'm going to flash back to the moment where I killed the inspector. He's already established that he's there. He's not dead. You can't change the already established fiction of the game. There are rules and regulations for that. Some of the things you can do, like, here's a good example. I'll let you read that. I'm going to stop here and just let you focus in on that. I know it's really, really shitty that I'm doing this to you, but I'm sorry. I'm not going to read it all. But another thing you can do during a score is give up on the score, which allows you to back off, go right into the downtime activity. You get usually a 0 payout unless you've stolen something. But you still face the heat and the entanglements as usual. I'll flip over to the downtime activity, which shouldn't be too far off. Teamwork is important. Assist other PCs rolling their actions, lead a group action, protect a teammate, set up a character who follows through on your action. These are all things you can do. Do them. Assisting a teammate, take 1 stress, you gain 1, they gain 1 to their die pool. Lead a group action. You can take stress. Well, your party takes stress for each PC that rolled 1 through 3 on their die roll. I can't read today, apparently. But if you're leading an action, which is great, because that means everybody's adding dice to this dice pool. If you're leading an action for every person who rolled a 1 through 3 as their best result, you take a point of stress. It's a problem, because that could drop you right into trauma. So be careful with that. You can protect, step up to face consequences that one of your teammates would otherwise face. You suffer it instead of them. You may roll to resist it as normal. You, as a cutter, can be like, nah, I'm just going to step in the way of this blade and let myself take that consequence. I'm still going to resist, try to block or parry, but I'm not letting my friend take that. I'm not going to do the examples because, again, by the book. Downtime activities. Things you can do as downtime activities. First thing you gain is your payoff. I generate your heat as your game master. Your game master rolls your entanglement, and then you get to do your downtime activities. Payoffs are usually anywhere from 2 to 10 coins. Which, if you're doing something wrong. If you're giving 10 coins for just robbing some random guy's house. But heat is important. You can generate anywhere from 2 to 6 heat. Gaining enough heat gives you a wanted level. You don't want that. Incarceration. The only way to reduce your crew's wanted level is through incarceration. When one of your crew members, friends, contacts, or framed enemy, you can literally be like, I don't want to play my character anymore. I'm going to have him go take the fall. And that'll lower the wanted level. If you have one of your PCs who you're willing to put into prison, go to prison, you can lower the wanted level of your crew. It's actually right here. It's actually really cool. And if your wanted level is too high, you can get that character killed. So if you have a wanted level of 4, and you're just like, I'm going to pass off this guy, he's dead. You don't have that character anymore. He's dead. But some of the things you can do in prison, as you saw right there, hold on, I have to flip back to it. You can have prison claims. You can have a guy on the inside be like, I'm in charge of this area, and then boom, you have prison claims. It's kind of cool. Your entanglement role is, depending on how high your heat is, and depending on your, I don't think it's dependent on your wanted level. I'm pretty sure it's just how high your heat is. Depends on just that. It depends on how bad your entanglement's going to be. Be careful with that. Entanglements at 6+ in heat is literally as much as having somebody flip on you during an interrogation, or have one of your PCs interrogated. You could have a demonic person beating the crap out of you, or you could be arrested, because why not? Arrest is kind of fun. Inspector presents a case file of evidence to the magistrate to begin persecution of your crew. Bluecoats send a detail to arrest you. So you can pay them off with a coin equal to your wanted level, 3+, and hand someone over for arrest. In other words, this is I don't want my characters to go to prison. I'm going to have my random NPC buddy who's part of my gang go for me. Because you can do that. Cooperation. A +3 status faction asks you for a favor. Agree to it or forfeit 1 rep per tier of the friendly faction. Or lose 1 status with them. You don't want to do that. If you don't have a +3 faction status, you avoid entanglement right now. Awesome. Demonic notice. Demon approaches the crew with a dark offer. Accept their bargain, hide until it loses interest, which you don't want to do. Because if it comes back after you violently, you're going to die. Demons are not to be trifled with in this game. Forfeit 3 rep when you do that, or deal with it another way. You could try to beat up the demon. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can try. Gang trouble. One of the gangs, or other cohort, causes trouble due to their flaws. You can lose faith, forfeit rep equal to your tier +1. Make an example of one of the gang members, or face reprisal from the wronged party. All this is roleplay aspect. I love entanglements because it increases roleplay aspect. If I could flip and turn the page. I just want to turn one. Then we have the interrogation, questioning, reprisals, rival, show of force, unquieted dead, which is a ghost comes and yells at you, or a vampire, depending on how angry or mad you've made your game master, or the usual suspects. Downtime activities include acquiring an asset, long-term project, recovery role, reduce heat, train, which is kind of cool. If you have the training facility in your territory, you can gain 1 point of experience for an attribute or playbook advancement if you have the appropriate crew training upgrade unlocked. But if you don't, you can't really use this one. You can indulge a vice, which lowers your stress. Not going to talk about that. This is all things you should do. How to play. Important things. We have the first and foremost, fiction first gaming. All role-playing games are about the fiction. Already established fiction should never be changed unless absolutely necessary to either save the party or save the game. I do not believe in Deus Ex Machina unless absolutely necessary. I used to do it a lot when I was a new game master and was killing my parties left and right by accident. Don't do it very much anymore. Now, if they die, they die. Triggering an action roll. Player decides to attempt a challenge. Character leads or gives orders to an NPC or an NPC group. Someone grabs the dice and gets all excited about making a roll and then rolls for shit. We'll get... Turn the page! Turn the page! Why we do this, how to choose an action, purposes of dangers of stress, NPC threat levels, important. This is all stuff you should know as a game master. Read that if you're going to play. There's always a consequence. That is very true. Every time you roll the dice and blades, the situation changes. There's no such thing as a nothing happens result from a roll. So, in other words, a failure is not just, oh, you failed. It's more like, you failed and got stabbed. Or, you failed when you were trying to pick the lock and you broke your lock picks. Or, my personal favorite is, you were trying to rob the house and the guy is an ex-sniper. He shoots you. I've done that a lot. Be careful whose house you rob in this game because they are all monsters. But there's a system called failing gracefully. It is designed to fail gracefully. You just use the core rules and forget extra details or specific cases. It'll be okay. If you want to ease into the mechanics, just start with risky action rolls and standard effect. Very simple. The game is about making everything work. It's actually really cool how this game's failing gracefully actually works for the game master and how it works on the players. Because most of the time, everything's usually standard effect with a risky roll. And it's telling you to stick with those two if you're not used to running the game yet. I agree with that. Setting precedents, we'll ignore that. Abstraction and detail, also going to ignore that. Actions, we're going to ignore that. Hey, look, the actions. Tune, command, all these other ones. We're going to skip past all of these. Now we're at my favorite part of the book, the player's best practices. Things as a player you should do. Embrace the scoundrel life. You are a criminal in this game. If you're trying to be the paladin who's the hero of the people, you can be Robin Hood and still be a criminal. Robin Hood was still a criminal. But remember, you're still a criminal. You might even be a crime lord. Go into danger, fall in love with trouble. You are going to be, most of the time, in a risky position or a desperate position in this game. You should be ready, willing, and able to understand that. This is a game about dangers. If you're not actively going into danger, you are actively avoiding the way that this game is supposed to be played. Don't be a weasel. This is what I was talking about. If your character has a really high dice pool for one skill, don't try to use only that skill. Because I guarantee, if your game master's like me, he's eventually going to tell you it doesn't work or it has little to no effect on what you're trying to do. You cannot use skirmish to... You can't use skirmish to pick a lock. Alright? I don't care what you say. You can say you smash open the door. That's not skirmishing the lock. That's smashing things. That's a different skill. It's called wrecking. You can't fight a door until unlocking itself. And if that's what it's saying right here. Choose all the action that matches what your character is doing. Do not, and I swear, I've had this happen where players trying to use things that are outside of the purview of the skill. If you are a game master and your players are constantly doing this, put your foot down. You have the power in the game to be like, I'm going to tell you no because it makes no sense. Take responsibility. You are also, as a player, you are a co-author of this game. Remember that. Everything that happens is not just one person's fault. It's your fault as well. So take responsibility for those actions. Use your stress. If you are too afraid to use your stress, you're really missing out on the game. Especially since using your stress is how you avoid taking actual damage. If you're so worried about dying or so worried about losing a character, which isn't really that big of a deal in this game because you can literally just pick up a different character. One of the many people who are in your gang who's not the player characters, who have been going out and doing things, you can have a character the same tier as everybody else with all the same experience and everything. It's not the same guy. Don't talk yourself out of the fun. It's very important. Build your character through play. Yes, you can have a background, but you should really build your character through the play. You should advance him using experience and choose how you want to play that character. Act now, plan later. Very, very true. This game is about action. It is. If you are not acting and just planning everything, you're not going to have as much fun. Even if you are a spider, act now, plan later. And then I'm going to stop here. But The score game and the crew game, these are things that you should read. But that's 186 pages I've covered so far, and it's been almost an hour. So I'm going to end here, guys. I'll talk to you all later. Thank you all for watching. And to all those viewers who have been sticking around and watching my videos, people who have been, how to put it, willingly participating in this joke of a YouTube channel I started. I started this for myself. I'm doing this to come out of my own shell. I'm not doing this for anybody else. But I appreciate everyone who's there for me. If you have a question, comment, or concern, or you just want to talk in the comments, send me, well, just post one. I'll listen, I'll talk, I'll respond. That's how I am. Other than that, I hope you all have a good rest of your day. And if you watch this at night, have a good night. If you're just listening to this, I hope your ears are full. Have a good night, guys.